The entire cabin gasped as Marcus Washington removed his oversized sunglasses and revealed his true identity. The once difficult passenger now stood tall in his tailored suit, company ID card dangling from his pocket. As CEO of Skyline Airlines, I've witnessed firsthand the discriminatory treatment our black passengers endure daily. The entire crew of Flight 2187 is suspended effective immediately. Phones recorded frantically as security escorted the stunned flight attendants off the aircraft. What the crew didn't know: Marcus's undercover operation was just beginning, and their suspension was merely the first domino to fall. What shocking discoveries would lead to the complete transformation of an entire industry? Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and equal treatment for all, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more stories of courage and accountability. Marcus Washington stared at his phone, scrolling through yet another viral video showing a black passenger being escorted off a Skyline Airlines flight. The comments section overflowed with similar stories, each one striking him like physical blows. As CEO of America's fifth largest airline, he'd built Skyline from a regional carrier into a major player, but something was deeply wrong within his company culture. "Mr. Washington?" His assistant Alicia knocked gently. "The executive meeting starts in 5 minutes." Marcus nodded, his mind still on the email he'd just received. It contained a letter from Tamir Jones, a 10-year-old boy who'd saved his allowance for months to visit his grandmother. According to the heartbreaking message, flight attendants had repeatedly questioned his unaccompanied minor status, made him move seats multiple times, and served him last despite his early boarding. "My mom says I should be proud to fly alone," Tamir had written. "But the way they looked at me made me feel like I did something wrong." In the sleek boardroom, Marcus barely heard the quarterly reports as his mind replayed scenes from his own life. Despite his Harvard MBA and tailored suits, airport security randomly selected him for additional screening on nearly every trip. Flight attendants routinely verified his first-class ticket multiple times while white passengers boarded unquestioned. Once, a passenger had complained about sitting next to him, assuming he'd been upgraded rather than paid full fare. Regarding the recent incident videos, Janet Pierce, his chief communications officer, was saying, "Our research suggests these are isolated events being amplified by social media algorithms. The data doesn't support systemic issues." Marcus looked up. "Does our customer satisfaction tracking break down by demographics?" Chief Operations Officer Derek Patterson cleared his throat. "We don't specifically track by race, as that could potentially open legal complications." "Convenient," Marcus muttered, too quietly for anyone to hear. "Our frontline staff follows established protocols," HR Director Christine Wells added. "We've seen no evidence of widespread discrimination." Marcus leaned forward. "How would we know if we don't track it?" An uncomfortable silence fell across the table. "I want solutions," Marcus said finally. "Not excuses." Later that evening, Marcus paced his home office while his wife Layla graded papers at her desk. As a law professor specializing in civil rights, she'd heard his frustrations for years. "They don't see it because they don't want to see it," Marcus said. "Every complaint gets classified as an isolated incident, even when the pattern is clear as day." "What are you thinking?" Layla asked, recognizing the look on her husband's face. "Something radical," he admitted. "I'm going undercover as a passenger." Layla set her papers down. "Marcus, that's necessary," he finished. "If I'm wrong, fantastic. But I need to know what's really happening on my aircraft." Over the next week, Marcus meticulously planned his operation. He identified Flight 2187, a route that had generated multiple complaints. He'd board as a regular passenger in economy, plus wearing casual clothes instead of his usual suits, with a baseball cap and sunglasses to alter his appearance. Only Thomas Jefferson, his childhood friend and now head of airport security, would know his true identity. Marcus created a detailed checklist of minor issues he would present. Nothing disruptive, but small requests that would test the crew's response. A slightly oversized carry-on, a seat change request, a special meal question. This could backfire spectacularly, Layla warned the night before the flight. The board could see this as entrapment. "Then I'll step down," Marcus said, checking the hidden camera disguised as a pen in his shirt pocket. "But I refuse to run an airline where a child feels ashamed for simply existing in a seat his mother paid for." As dawn broke, Marcus stood before his bathroom mirror, transforming from the polished executive featured in Fortune magazine to an ordinary passenger. He grabbed his baseball cap, slipped on sunglasses, and replaced his designer watch with a simple fitness tracker. Looking at his reflection, he felt a mix of determination and apprehension. In just hours, he would discover whether his company truly lived up to the values emblazoned on every Skyline aircraft. He pressed record on his hidden camera and whispered, "Let's see who we really are." Marcus Washington arrived at the terminal precisely 60 minutes before departure, intentionally later than his usual 3-hour buffer. The first test would begin at the gate. He approached gate agent Valerie Sanders, who was busy organizing boarding passes. "Excuse me," Marcus said, placing his carry-on on the scale. "I'm wondering if I could get a window seat instead of my assigned aisle." Valerie glanced up briefly, her eyes scanning him before returning to her computer. "We're fully booked today. Boarding starts in 20 minutes. Without acknowledging his request further, she turned to the white passenger behind Marcus. "How can I help you, sir?" The man, dressed similarly to Marcus in casual travel attire, asked about upgrading his seat. Valerie immediately pulled up options, offered suggestions, and processed his request with a warm smile. Marcus observed the interaction carefully, noting the stark difference in tone, body language, and helpfulness. Was this coincidence or pattern? He would need more data. During boarding, Marcus intentionally approached with his carry-on slightly, exceeding the size limits, not enough to cause problems but noticeable if someone was looking to enforce rules strictly. "That looks too big," Flight attendant Heather Michaels stated flatly as Marcus approached the aircraft door. "You'll need to check that." "It fit on my flight yesterday," Marcus replied politely. Heather's eyes narrowed. "Well, it's not going to fit today." As Marcus began to respond, a white businessman approached with an obviously larger bag. Heather stepped aside, smiling. "Welcome aboard. Let me help you find space for that." Marcus was directed to wait while several more passengers boarded. After 5 minutes, Heather returned. "Fine. Try to make it fit, but if it doesn't, it's going to baggage." Once on board, Marcus navigated to his Economy Plus seat. As he placed his bag in the overhead compartment, where it fit perfectly, flight attendant Bradley Wilson approached. "Sir, are you sure you're in the correct section?" Bradley asked loudly, glancing at Marcus's casual clothing. "This is Economy Plus." "Yes, 14C, Marcus replied, showing his boarding pass. Bradley examined it with obvious skepticism. All right. Then, Marcus settled into his seat, activating the recording device discreetly. Throughout the boarding process, he observed the crew's interactions with passengers. White travelers received help with bags, warm welcomes, and proactive offers of assistance. In contrast, minority passengers, particularly black travelers, received cursory acknowledgments or outright suspicion. During the pre-flight safety demonstration, Marcus pretended to nap while listening to nearby crew conversations. "Another full flight with these people," Heather whispered to Bradley. "Better watch the overhead bins," Bradley chuckled, "and the bathroom lines." One flight attendant, Jasmine Thomas, who was black, remained professional but noticeably quiet during these exchanges. Her discomfort was evident in her body language, eyes downcast, minimal participation in crew banter. Once airborne, Marcus observed service patterns. When he pressed his call button to request water, 20 minutes passed before Bradley responded with visible annoyance. Meanwhile, white passengers' call buttons received immediate attention. "Still waiting on that water," Marcus mentioned when Bradley passed his row for the third time. "We're serving front to back, sir," Bradley replied curtly, despite having just served the white passenger across the aisle. When turbulence hit midway through the flight, creating a chaotic service situation, the discrimination became even more apparent. White passengers received reassurance and assistance, while minority passengers were given curt instructions or ignored entirely. Jasmine, noticing Marcus's empty cup, quietly provided water during a moment when Bradley was occupied elsewhere. Her quick glance conveyed volumes, an acknowledgement of the disparate treatment occurring. After 3 hours of documented inconsistencies, Marcus decided to escalate his test. The most revealing behaviors often emerged when staff felt challenged. Have you ever experienced different treatment while traveling? What about witnessing someone else being treated unfairly based on how they looked? Comment 1 if you've witnessed discrimination while flying, and hit that subscribe button if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their appearance. How would you react if you were in Marcus's position? Keep watching to see what shocking confrontation happens next as this undercover CEO decides to push boundaries to expose the truth. 4 hours into the 6-hour flight, Marcus's water cup had been empty for nearly an hour. He'd pressed his call button 40 minutes ago, but despite flight attendants passing repeatedly, none had acknowledged him. Across the aisle, a white passenger had requested and received 2 drinks in the same time frame. Marcus pressed the button again. 10 minutes later, Bradley Wilson finally appeared, visibly irritated. "Yes?" he asked, not bothering to hide his annoyance. "I pressed the call button 40 minutes ago," Marcus explained calmly. "I'd like some water, please." Bradley's posture stiffened. "We're very busy, sir. You'll need to wait your turn." "I understand you're busy," Marcus replied, maintaining his composure. "But I've noticed other passengers receiving prompt service while my request has been ignored repeatedly." Bradley's expression darkened. "Are you suggesting something?" "I'm simply stating what I've observed," Marcus said. "I would appreciate the same level of service others are receiving." "Look," Bradley lowered his voice, leaning closer. "If you continue being disruptive, I'll have to report this to the captain." A middle-aged woman across the aisle frowned. "He's just asking for water, for goodness sake. I've had 3 drinks since we took off." Bradley ignored her completely. "I'll get to you when I can," he told Marcus before walking away without addressing the request. 15 minutes later, Marcus pressed the call button again. This time, head flight attendant Diana Roberts appeared, her face set in a practiced customer service smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sir, I understand you're having an issue with our service?" Her tone suggested the problem was with Marcus, not the service. "I've been requesting water for nearly an hour," Marcus explained. "I've observed other passengers receiving prompt attention while my requests are ignored." Diana's smile tightened. "Our crew is trained to serve all passengers equally. If you're suggesting otherwise, that's a serious accusation." "I'm not making accusations," Marcus replied. "I'm stating facts about my experience today." Diana's voice dropped to a patronizing whisper. "Sir, perhaps you're not aware of how busy we are. If you continue this disruptive behavior, we'll have security meet the aircraft upon arrival." Passengers nearby had begun to notice the exchange. Several pulled out phones recording the interaction. Most seemed to assume Marcus was the problem, a difficult passenger causing trouble. "I don't see how requesting water constitutes disruptive behavior," Marcus said, loud enough for others to hear clearly. "It's your tone and attitude," Diana responded, though Marcus had maintained perfect calm throughout. "As a frequent flyer, you should understand that crew instructions must be followed for everyone's safety." Jasmine Thomas approached cautiously. "Diana, I can handle this section if you need to." "I've got it under control." Diana cut her off sharply. "Return to your section." Jasmine hesitated before retreating, shooting Marcus an apologetic glance. An elderly white man in the row behind Marcus spoke up. "Young man's just asking for water. I heard him and he was perfectly polite. Been watching this whole thing unfold." Diana turned to the man with a completely different demeanor. "I appreciate your concern, sir, but you don't have all the information. We've had previous issues." This was a blatant lie, as Marcus had not interacted with the crew before this incident. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Cabin crew, please prepare for landing in 30 minutes. Also, please be advised we're contacting ground authorities regarding a passenger disturbance in the main cabin." Several passengers looked around in confusion, while others glanced accusingly at Marcus. Diana gave him a triumphant look before walking away, still without providing water. Marcus discreetly sent a text to Thomas Jefferson, head of security. Flight 2187 landing in 30. Crew reporting me as disruptive passenger. Plan B in effect. The response came seconds later. Understood. Team in position. As the plane began its descent, Marcus noticed passengers filming, whispering, and watching him warily. Diana made a point of walking past repeatedly, checking his seatbelt with excessive scrutiny while ignoring other passengers. The aircraft touched down with a gentle bump. As passengers prepared to deplane, the captain made another announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you remain seated upon arrival. Security personnel will be boarding before anyone deplanes. Thank you for your cooperation. Diana and Bradley exchanged satisfied glances. Jasmine looked down at her hands, visibly uncomfortable. Marcus simply waited, knowing what would happen. Next would change everything. Not just for these flight attendants, but for his entire airline. The aircraft door opened precisely 4 minutes after the jetway connected. Passengers peered anxiously down the aisle as 3 uniformed security officers boarded, led by Thomas Jefferson, Skyline's head of airport security. Tall and imposing, in his crisp uniform, Thomas scanned the cabin with practiced efficiency. Diana Roberts stepped forward immediately. "Thank you for responding so quickly," she said with professional concern. "The disruptive passenger is in 14C. He's been confrontational throughout the flight, refusing to comply with crew instructions and making accusations against staff." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Can you describe the nature of the disruption?" Repeatedly pressing the call button, arguing with crew members, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere for other passengers, Bradley Wilson interjected. When asked to cooperate, he escalated the situation. Thomas looked toward Marcus, who sat calmly, observing the theater playing out. "Sir, would you come with me, please?" Without protest, Marcus rose and followed Thomas toward the front of the aircraft. As they passed, Diana and Bradley exchanged triumphant glances. Passengers whispered and continued recording. In the jetway, out of earshot from the cabin, Thomas spoke quietly. "How bad was it?" "Worse than we expected," Marcus replied. "Everything's recorded." The elderly man who had defended Marcus earlier called out from his seat near the door. "Young man, this isn't right. He didn't do anything wrong." A woman from across the aisle joined in. "I was watching the whole time. The crew was clearly treating him differently than the rest of us." Diana stepped forward. "With all due respect, you didn't see the earlier interactions. We have procedures we must follow for everyone's safety." "That's a lie," a college student said, holding up her phone. "I've been recording since they threatened him for asking for water. Nothing happened before that." Passengers began speaking over each other, many defending Marcus while others looked confused. Thomas raised his hand for silence. "Sir," Thomas addressed Marcus formally for the benefit of onlookers, "would you please step into the terminal to discuss this matter?" Marcus nodded and followed Thomas into the jetway, where 2 more security officers waited. Once the door closed behind them, Thomas handed Marcus a tablet. "You need to see this before you make your decision," Thomas said. The tablet displayed security statistics for Skyline Airlines over the past year, calls for security assistance by passenger demographic, removal rates, complaint follow-ups. The data was damning. Black passengers were 6 times more likely to have security called on them than white passengers for similar reported behaviors. Complaints filed by minority passengers were 78% less likely to receive follow-up investigation. "This isn't just Flight 2187, Thomas said gravely. "It's systemic. I've been tracking this for months, ever since you mentioned the possibility of unconscious bias in our operations. Any of this could be explained away individually," Marcus noted, scrolling through incident reports. "But collectively, it's undeniable," Thomas finished. "And there's more. Security footage shows consistently different treatment at gates, boarding, deplaning. I've compiled it all." Marcus took a deep breath. Decision made. Original plan was to complete the investigation over several flights before taking action. After what I just witnessed in there? Thomas raised an eyebrow. "That crew needs to be addressed now, not later." Marcus straightened his shoulders, removing his baseball cap. Let's do this. Meanwhile, in the cabin, tensions were escalating. Diana was attempting to begin deplaning, but several passengers were demanding to know what would happen to Marcus. That's confidential, Diana insisted. But I assure you, Skyline Airlines takes safety violations very seriously. The only violation I saw was how you treated him, the elderly man countered. Jasmine Thomas, standing at the back of the cabin, looked increasingly distressed as Diana and Bradley continued fabricating details about Marcus's supposed misbehavior. He was warned multiple times, Bradley claimed loudly. We have zero tolerance for threatening behavior toward crew members. The jetway door reopened. Thomas entered first, expression professionally neutral. Behind him walked Marcus Washington, but transformed. Gone were the baseball cap and sunglasses. His posture was now commanding, his presence undeniable. In his hand, he held his company ID card with its distinctive gold executive stripe. Diana's face drained of color. Bradley froze mid-sentence. Jasmine's eyes widened in shock. The cabin fell completely silent as recognition dawned on the flight attendants' faces. For this moment, everything Marcus had built in his career, his reputation, possibly even his position, hung in the balance. But some principles mattered more than career security. Equal treatment for every passenger who trusted his airline with their safety wasn't just a corporate value to frame on a wall. It was the minimum standard of human dignity, and he was about to ensure everyone understood that, starting now. I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Marcus Washington said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the silent cabin. He held up his company ID card. I'm Marcus Washington, Chief Executive Officer of Skyline Airlines. A collective gasp rippled through the aircraft. Diana Roberts' mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Bradley Wilson took an involuntary step backward. Jasmine Thomas pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes wide. That's impossible, Diana finally stammered. You can't be... Marcus activated his phone and launched the company's emergency broadcast system, a feature designed for crisis communication that would simultaneously stream to every Skyline employee's device worldwide. This is Marcus Washington, your CEO, he began, his voice now reaching not just the cabin but thousands of employees across the globe. I'm currently on board Flight 2187, where I've spent the past 6 hours as a passenger in seat 14C. He turned toward the still stunned flight crew. Effective immediately, the entire crew of Flight 2187 is suspended pending a full investigation into discriminatory treatment of passengers. Phones throughout the cabin recorded the unfolding drama. Some passengers appeared confused, others vindicated. A few applauded. Mr. Washington, Diana stepped forward, her voice quavering but attempting authority. This is highly irregular and completely inappropriate. You've deliberately set up this situation to entrap hardworking staff. Ms. Roberts, Marcus interrupted calmly. Every interaction on this flight has been recorded. He gestured to the pen camera on his shirt. Not as a gotcha moment, but because I genuinely hope to be proven wrong. Unfortunately, what I witnessed today confirms reports that have been reaching my office for months. Bradley pushed forward aggressively. This is a setup. You can't judge an entire flight based on a few misunderstandings. 40 minutes for water isn't a misunderstanding, called out a passenger. It's deliberate. Marcus raised his hand. Let's be clear. This isn't about water. It's about a pattern of behavior I observed throughout this flight. Different passengers receiving dramatically different levels of service based solely on their appearance. Diana's face flushed red. We treat all passengers equally. You came looking for problems. Actually, Jasmine Thomas said, stepping forward with visible nervousness, I've witnessed this pattern on multiple flights. The cabin fell silent again as Jasmine continued. I've been afraid to speak up because crew members who report discrimination typically find themselves with reduced hours or problematic schedules. But what happened today? It happens all the time. Bradley turned on her furiously. You're just trying to save yourself. I have 27 videos from just this flight, announced the college student who had been recording. I started documenting after I noticed the pattern an hour in. I'm happy to share them all. Other passengers began offering their footage as well. Some admitted they'd assumed Marcus was the problem initially, but had changed their assessment as they observed more interactions. Diana's professional demeanor crumbled. "This is a hostile work environment. I'll sue this airline for entrapment and defamation. You can't record employees without consent. Our employment contract explicitly states that all on-duty activities may be monitored," Marcus replied evenly. "And our aircraft announcement at the beginning of every flight informs all passengers that they may be recorded for quality assurance purposes." Thomas Jefferson stepped forward. "All suspended crew members, please gather your personal belongings. You'll be escorted to HR for formal interviews." As security began organizing the crew's departure, Marcus addressed the passengers. "I want to personally apologize to everyone on board today. What you experienced or witnessed does not reflect the values of Skyline Airlines. As compensation, every passenger will receive full ticket reimbursement and a voucher for future travel." He turned specifically to those who had been treated poorly. "Additionally, I would be grateful if those who experienced or witnessed discrimination would stay behind to provide statements. Your input is crucial to addressing these issues." As the reality of the situation sank in, Diana's professional mask completely dissolved. "Do you have any idea who my uncle is? Richard Whitmore sits on your board. This little stunt will cost you your job." A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin at the mention of Richard Whitmore, one of the most powerful figures in the airline industry. Marcus didn't flinch. "Then I'll be fired for doing what's right." As Diana and Bradley were escorted off the aircraft, Jasmine remained, tears streaming down her face. "I should have said something sooner. I'm so sorry." "You spoke up when it mattered," Marcus assured her. "That takes courage." As passengers began to deplane, many stopped to shake Marcus's hand or share their own experiences. The elderly man who had defended him earlier approached last. "I flew during segregation," he said quietly. "Thought we'd come further than this by now." "We will," Marcus promised, "starting today." What would you have done if you witnessed discrimination like this happening right in front of you? Would you have spoken up like Jasmine eventually did, or stayed silent to protect your job? Comment 1. If you believe speaking up against injustice is always worth the risk, even when it's difficult. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more stories about people standing up for what's right. The question now is, what powerful forces will Marcus face for exposing this uncomfortable truth? How far will Richard Whitmore go to protect his niece and the status quo? Keep watching to find out. By midnight, Marcus Washington's undercover operation had exploded across social media. Sky CEO and Flying While Black dominated trending lists nationwide. Major news networks ran continuous coverage, and Skyline Airlines' mention volume increased by 2,700%. In the company's downtown headquarters, Marcus stood at the window of the emergency board meeting room, watching city lights flicker against the night sky. Behind him, 14 board members sat in various states of concern, outrage, or calculation. "This emergency session of the Skyline Airlines board will come to order," Chairwoman Patricia Reynolds announced, her voice tight with strain. "I believe we all understand why we're here." Marcus turned to face them. Before anyone could speak, his phone buzzed with a notification. The video had just surpassed 10 million views. "What you did today was unprecedented," Patricia continued, "and potentially catastrophic for this airline." "With respect," Marcus replied, "what was happening on our aircraft daily was the true catastrophe. It just wasn't visible to those of us in the C-suite." Richard Whitmore cleared his throat. At 67, the veteran airline executive commanded attention without effort. His family had been in aviation since the industry's infancy. "Marcus," he began with artificial patience, "we all appreciate your commitment to equality. It's commendable. But your methods today were frankly reckless. You've exposed the company to enormous liability, damaged employee morale, and created a PR nightmare." "I disagree," Marcus said simply. "The liability existed the moment we allowed discriminatory practices to continue unchecked. I've merely brought it to light where we can address it properly." Richard's jaw tightened. You publicly humiliated professional crew members who have served this airline for years. My niece Diana has an exemplary record. Your niece, Marcus, interrupted, threatened a passenger with security intervention for requesting water. A passenger who, I remind you, paid for his ticket and deserved basic service. The fact that the passenger happened to be me is irrelevant. He placed a tablet on the conference table and slid it toward the center. This contains all footage from today's flight, along with Mr. Jefferson's statistical analysis of security calls and complaint resolution by passenger demographics. The board members exchanged uneasy glances as the data appeared on their screens. This is troubling, admitted Fernando Vasquez, head of the audit committee. If accurate, it suggests patterns we cannot ignore. It's data mining, Richard dismissed. You can make statistics show whatever you want. The immediate issue is damage control. I move that we reinstate the suspended crew while conducting a proper investigation, issue a statement about our commitment to fair treatment, and put this behind us. Marcus stood perfectly still. If this board votes to reinstate that crew before a full investigation, I will resign effective immediately. A tense silence filled the room. Marcus's phone rang. Alicia, his assistant. Sir, the PR team needs direction. The crew is giving interviews to Channel 7 News right now. Minutes later, the board watched grimly as Diana Roberts appeared on screen, tearful but defiant. I was ambushed and set up by my own CEO. 20 years of dedicated service, thrown away for a publicity stunt. He came looking for problems while disguised like some kind of spy. How are flight attendants supposed to do their jobs if they're being secretly recorded and tested? Bradley Wilson sat beside her, adding, He's trying to make himself look like some kind of hero. But what about the trauma he's causing dedicated aviation professionals? We followed all procedures exactly as trained. The reporter turned to the camera. Skyline Airline stock is down 12% in after-hours trading following today's viral confrontation. Industry experts question whether CEO Marcus Washington's unorthodox approach may have created more problems than it solved. Patricia muted the television. Our phones are ringing off the hook. Competing airlines are publicly supporting the crew members. The flight attendants union is considering a sympathy strike. Marcus remained unmoved. The question each of you needs to answer is simple. Does Skyline stand for equal treatment of all passengers, or don't we? Of course we do, Richard said, smoothly. But there are proper channels, proper procedures, which have failed consistently, Marcus interrupted. I didn't take this step lightly. For months I've tried working through those proper channels. Reports were buried, complaints were dismissed, statistics were manipulated. By whom? Patricia asked sharply. That's part of what needs investigation, Marcus replied. But I suggest looking at departments with personal connections to board members. Richard's face darkened as several board members glanced his way. Across town, Jasmine Thomas sat in her apartment, staring at her phone. Death threats and support messages flooded her social media in equal measure. A text from an unknown number appeared. Traitors don't last long in this industry. Meanwhile, Marcus's wife Layla answered their door to find news crews camped on their lawn. Their 16-year-old son's school had called. He was being harassed by classmates whose parents worked for the airline. Back in the boardroom, the debate continued past midnight. Half the board supported Marcus's decisive action. The other half, led by Richard, pushed for damage control and reinstatement. This isn't going away with a press release, Marcus insisted. We have an opportunity to lead industry-wide change. As the meeting adjourned without resolution, Richard approached Marcus privately. You've made a powerful enemy today, Marcus. This could have been handled discreetly. That's exactly the problem, Marcus replied. Discrimination thrives in discretion. As Richard turned to leave, he added, I've worked with men like you before. You'll compromise eventually. Everyone does when enough pressure is applied. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Security footage from the airport mysteriously corrupted. Someone's covering tracks. The next morning, Marcus woke to news that Skyline stock had dropped another 8%. Boycott Skyline competed with Comar's Stand with Marcus for the top trending spot. His corporate email contained 3 resignation letters from executives who felt blindsided by his actions. As he prepared for another emergency board meeting, his personal phone rang. "Mr. Washington? This is Aaron Michaels, attorney for the flight attendants of Flight 2187. I thought you might want to know, we're filing a $30 million lawsuit against you personally and Skyline Airlines for entrapment, defamation, and creating a hostile work environment." Marcus ended the call and straightened his tie. The fight was just beginning. 1 week after the Flight 2187 incident, Marcus Washington's world had turned upside down. During his morning briefing, his new interim communications director, the previous one had resigned, slid a tablet across the desk. "It just dropped on social media an hour ago." Marcus watched in disbelief as footage appeared to show him deliberately provoking the flight crew, edited to remove their dismissive responses and include only his increasingly frustrated requests. Somehow his calm demeanor had been transformed through selective editing to appear aggressive and entitled. "This isn't what happened," Marcus said, voice tight. "Who released this?" "Anonymous account, but it's being amplified by aviation blogs and picked up by mainstream outlets. The narrative is shifting to CEO sets up employees." His phone rang, general counsel alerting him that the Flight Attendants Union had filed a formal lawsuit naming both Skyline Airlines and Marcus personally, citing malicious entrapment and deliberate public humiliation of aviation professionals. By midday, an exclusive report aired on National Business Network. Sources close to Skyline CEO Marcus Washington reveal a history of workplace volatility. The piece included allegations from former colleagues claiming Marcus had engaged in threatening behavior at previous companies, all completely fabricated. "They're trying to destroy your credibility," Layla said that evening, her law professor's mind analyzing the strategy. "Classic character assassination." "But who's they?" Marcus wondered. His answer came partially the next morning when Thomas Jefferson was suspended by the board for protocol violations in the security response to Flight 2187. "Richard Whitmore called an executive session without you," Thomas explained over the phone. "Claimed I should have followed standard procedures instead of participating in your publicity stunt. Half the board voted to suspend me pending investigation." "Thomas, I'm sorry." "Don't be. We knew the risks. But Marcus, the airport security. Footage I compiled? It's gone. Someone with high-level access has wiped everything." 3 days later, 2 passengers who had offered the strongest testimonies about discrimination on the flight publicly recanted. One, a marketing executive from Chicago, issued a statement claiming he misinterpreted the situation due to camera angles and now believed the crew had acted appropriately. Marcus's suspicions grew when he learned the man's company had recently received a major advertising contract from Vista Airlines, Richard Whitmore's previous employer, where his son now served as marketing director. The pressure intensified when the Federal Aviation Administration announced an investigation into unauthorized operational activities by Skyline's CEO, questioning whether Marcus's undercover operation had potentially compromised flight safety protocols. Industry blacklisting began subtly. Partner airlines delayed responding to coordination requests. Maintenance facilities reported scheduling conflicts for routine service. Gate assignments at major hubs mysteriously changed to less desirable locations. "They're isolating us," Marcus told his executive team, now missing 3 key members, who had resigned. At home, the situation grew personal. Layla discovered her car vandalized in the faculty parking lot, racial slurs keyed into the paint. Their son reported being followed by an unknown car after basketball practice. Security cameras at their home detected tampering. "It's intimidation," Layla said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Someone wants you to back down, Marcus." That evening, Richard Whitmore requested a private meeting. In a downtown restaurant's secluded private dining room, he presented his offer. "Here's how this ends without destroying everyone involved," Richard said, sliding a document across the table. "The crew is reinstated with full back pay and public apologies. You acknowledge that your methods, while well-intentioned, were inappropriate. The airline commits to a 3-year diversity initiative, which you oversee until your scheduled retirement. Everyone saves face. And if I decline? Richard's smile never reached his eyes. The edited videos are just the beginning. There are board members ready to call for your removal over this stunt. Your security chief's career is finished. Those flight attendants, including my niece, will pursue their lawsuit to the bitter end. Your family will continue facing harassment. Are you threatening my family? Marcus's voice turned to ice. Merely predicting outcomes, Richard replied smoothly. This industry protects its own, Marcus. You've violated that unwritten code. But there's always a path to redemption. Marcus left without accepting the offer, but Richard's confident smile suggested he expected Marcus would eventually cave under mounting pressure. Back at headquarters, Marcus found Jasmine Thomas waiting in his office. Since coming forward, she had been placed on administrative leave, for her own protection. The other flight attendants are being coached on what to say, she reported. They're building a case that you targeted that specific flight because of Diana's connection to Richard, claiming it was corporate sabotage rather than a legitimate investigation. Thank you for the information, Marcus said, but you should distance yourself from me for your own safety. Jasmine straightened. With respect, sir, that's exactly what they want, to isolate those willing to speak truth. After she left, Marcus noticed a small device tucked behind his desk plant. A hidden camera, professionally installed. Searching further, he discovered a sophisticated microphone under his conference table. Someone had been monitoring his private conversations, likely for days or weeks. This wasn't just corporate politics anymore. This was warfare. That night, instead of going home, Marcus checked into a hotel under a false name. In the room, he made a call not to his executive team, but to someone from outside the industry entirely. Zoe Chen, a former FBI investigator who now ran a specialized private security firm. I need someone with no connections to aviation, Marcus explained. The corruption runs deeper than I initially thought. If half of what I'm seeing in the news is true, Zoe replied, you've stirred up a hornet's nest, Mr. Washington. The news isn't telling the full story, Marcus said. Someone powerful wants me gone, and they're willing to go to extraordinary lengths to make it happen. Then we'll need to go to even more extraordinary lengths to expose them, Zoe answered. When can we meet? In a nondescript office building far from Skyline's headquarters, Marcus Washington met Zoe Chen for the first time. Petite with calculating eyes and a reputation for ruthless thoroughness, the former FBI investigator wasted no time on pleasantries. You've made powerful enemies, Zoe said, spreading photos across the conference table. Richard Whitmore isn't just a board member, he's practically airline royalty. The images showed Richard at various industry events, always at the center, surrounded by executives from every major carrier. Another series of photos displayed his connections to regulatory officials, politicians, and media executives. 3 generations of Whitmores have shaped American aviation, Zoe continued. Richard's grandfather helped establish the first commercial routes. His father pioneered the hub and spoke system. Richard himself has served on the boards of 4 major airlines, which explains the industry-wide blacklisting we're experiencing, Marcus noted. It goes deeper. Zoe pulled up financial records. I've identified unusual trading patterns in Skyline stock beginning 3 months ago. Someone anticipated your company's value dropping. Insider trading? Possibly. But more interesting is where the profits went. Shell companies ultimately connected to Vista Airlines' expansion fund. Richard's son's company, Marcus realized. Exactly. The Whitmores appear to be positioning Vista to acquire Skyline's routes if your stock falls low enough. Over the next week, Zoe's team meticulously built their case. While Marcus maintained his public duties as CEO, Zoe worked behind the scenes, following money trails, communications, and connections. Meanwhile, Jasmine Thomas proved invaluable, secretly connecting with other minority flight attendants across the Skyline network. More than 30 came forward with evidence of systemic discrimination, describing an unwritten but clearly understood hierarchy of passenger treatment. It's built into the culture, Jasmine explained during a secure meeting. New hires who object are quickly sidelined with poor schedules or difficult routes. Those who comply advance. Do you have documentation? Zoe asked. Jasmine nodded. Performance reviews with coded language, crew assignments showing patterns, and this. She handed over a training manual with handwritten notes in the margins. These unofficial tips are passed down from trainers to new hires. The notes included disturbing instructions. Watch Section D passengers more closely for compliance issues, Section D being where economy passengers typically sat, with higher percentages of minority travelers. Another note read, Premium, service priorities, first tier, 1A passengers, second tier, 1B passengers. Code words. Jasmine explained referred to white and non-white first-class passengers respectively. Marcus brought in a trusted IT specialist who discovered something alarming. Someone with executive credentials had accessed the customer complaint database regularly, systematically burying discrimination reports by reclassifying them as general service issues. The access logs pointed to Richard Whitmore's executive assistant, who had maintained system permissions from his previous role with the airline. As evidence mounted, former Skyline employees began contacting Marcus directly, a black pilot who had been passed over for promotion 6 times despite perfect performance, a customer service manager who was fired after elevating too many minority passenger complaints, a corporate trainer who was asked to remove cultural sensitivity modules from the onboarding process. The picture became clear. Richard Whitmore hadn't just protected his niece, he had cultivated an entire corporate culture. He's been steering this airline for years from his board position, Marcus realized, using his influence to maintain the status quo while I focused on financial performance. Zoe made another breakthrough when her team traced the harassment of witnesses back to a private security firm that had previously worked exclusively for Vista Airlines. The intimidation campaign has Richard's fingerprints all over it. She confirmed. But he's careful. There's nothing directly linking him to the actions. Their most significant discovery came from an unexpected source. Thomas Jefferson, though suspended, had maintained backup copies of the security footage he'd compiled. Footage showing clear patterns of discriminatory treatment throughout Skyline's network. They deleted the airport servers, Thomas explained, but didn't know about my personal backups. Marcus received private messages of support from minority executives at other airlines facing similar battles. What you're doing at Skyline is giving us courage, wrote the CFO of a competing carrier. The old guard is entrenched everywhere, not just your company. As their investigation advanced, Richard called for another emergency board meeting, this time to force a vote on Marcus's removal. The timing wasn't coincidental. He must have learned about their investigation through his sources. He's making his move before we're ready, Marcus told Zoe during their final strategy session. Then we accelerate, she replied simply. How many board members can you trust completely? Maybe 5 of the 14, Marcus admitted. Not enough for a majority. Then we need to change some minds before tomorrow's vote. That night, Marcus sent an encrypted message to each board member. Before voting tomorrow, you deserve to know what's really happening at Skyline. Your device will receive a secure file at 6 a.m. Review it before the meeting. This information does not leave your possession. At dawn, each board member received a comprehensive dossier outlining the conspiracy, backed by financial records, witness statements, and security footage. The message was clear. A vote to remove Marcus would be a vote to support documented discrimination and market manipulation. As Marcus prepared to enter the boardroom the next morning, his phone pinged with a message from Zoe. Package delivered to media contacts. Ready on your signal. Marcus straightened his tie and took a deep breath. The next few hours would determine not just his fate, but the future of equality in an entire industry. Have you ever discovered that something corrupt was happening right under your nose? How far would you go to expose the truth knowing powerful people might come after you? Comment 1. If you believe standing up for what's right is worth any price, and hit that subscribe button to follow more stories of courage in the face of systemic injustice. With Richard Whitmore planning Marcus's downfall and the board vote just minutes away, what evidence will turn the tide? Will Marcus's career end today, or will justice finally prevail? Keep watching to see the dramatic boardroom showdown that will change the airline industry forever. Marcus Washington arrived at Skyline headquarters at precisely 7:30 a.m., 3 hours before the emergency board meeting. The early morning quiet allowed him to center himself for what would likely be the most consequential day of his career. His executive assistant, Alicia, met him with a concerned expression. They've changed the meeting location to the Vista building downtown, Richard Whitmore's territory. A transparent intimidation tactic. Thank you, Alicia. Please cancel my other appointments today. Marcus used the unexpected time to make crucial calls. First to the family of 10-year-old Tamir Jones, whose letter had initially sparked his investigation. Mrs. Jones, this is Marcus Washington from Skyline Airlines. I'm calling to ask if you and Tamir would consider sharing your experience publicly. Tamir's mother was initially hesitant. After what happened, we've been afraid to fly at all. I understand completely, but your son's voice could help change things for thousands of other passengers. After 20 minutes of honest conversation, she agreed. Tamir's been following your story. He says you're his hero now. Next, Marcus contacted Jerome Baldwin, president of the National Civil Rights Coalition. Jerome, it's time. We need your public support today. You'll have it, Jerome promised. Our legal team is preparing a statement about the pattern of discrimination across the entire industry. Your case is just the tip of the iceberg. By 9:15 a.m., Marcus's coalition was growing. Jasmine had organized 27 minority flight attendants willing to publicly testify about systemic discrimination. Thomas Jefferson had been reinstated after his attorney threatened a wrongful termination lawsuit with evidence of Richard's interference. Most crucially, Marcus worked with his loyal executives to prepare a comprehensive anti-discrimination plan that would transform Skyline's operations from the ground up. As he prepared to leave for the board meeting, Zoe Chen called with unexpected news. We found the smoking gun, she said without preamble. An employee inside Skyline's IT department archived emails showing Richard Whitmore explicitly instructing HR to ignore certain categories of complaints. She was afraid to come forward. Until now. Send everything to my secure server, Marcus directed. And Zoe, thank you. The Vista building's imposing glass tower reflected the morning sunlight as Marcus's car pulled up. Security guards, not Skyline's usual team, checked his identification with unnecessary scrutiny. In the elevator riding up to the penthouse boardroom, Marcus received a final text from Thomas. Media alerted, civil rights organizations in position, Warner Truth at Skyline trending. The board members were already seated when Marcus arrived. Richard Whitmore sat at the head of the table, a deliberate repositioning from his usual seat. Marcus, Richard nodded with false cordiality. Thank you for joining us. I've taken the liberty of preparing the agenda. I'm sure you have, Marcus replied calmly, taking his seat. Richard cleared his throat. Given recent events that have damaged Skyline's reputation, stock value, and employee morale, I've called this emergency session to discuss leadership transition. Before we proceed, interrupted Patricia Reynolds, the chairwoman, I believe all board members should acknowledge receipt of this morning's confidential materials. Richard's expression flickered with annoyance. Any materials should have been submitted through proper channels. They were sent directly to board members due to evidence of communication tampering, Marcus stated. Has everyone had a chance to review the documents? Around the table, heads nodded. Some wouldn't meet Richard's gaze. These last-minute documents are merely attempts to distract from the issue at hand, Richard said dismissively. The motion before us is simple. Skyline Airlines requires new leadership to recover from recent self-inflicted damage. Marcus remained composed. Before voting, I'd like to present my findings on discrimination within our airline and my plan to address it. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus methodically outlined the evidence his team had gathered. Statistical analyses of passenger complaints, security incident reports broken down by race, witness testimonies, and financial records showing the deliberate suppression of this information. Richard repeatedly attempted to interrupt, but several board members insisted Marcus be allowed to finish. Finally, Marcus concluded, I've prepared a comprehensive reformation plan to address these issues. including new training protocols, accountability measures, and transparency reporting. The boardroom fell silent as Marcus distributed the plan. "This is all very interesting," Richard said, voice tight with controlled anger. "But it doesn't change the fact that your unauthorized investigation has exposed this company to massive liability and damaged our reputation. I move we proceed with the vote on leadership." "Actually," said Fernando Vasquez, "I believe the liability existed in our discriminatory practices, not in exposing them." Linda Cheng, another board member, nodded. "These documents raise serious concerns about attempts to conceal evidence. We can't vote without addressing these allegations." Richard's face darkened. "This is a transparent attempt to avoid accountability." He was interrupted by a commotion outside the boardroom. The doors burst open and Diana Roberts rushed in looking disheveled and agitated. "Uncle Richard," she exclaimed before catching herself. "Mr. Whitmore, I just saw the news. They're saying you told us to—" She stopped, suddenly aware of the full board watching her. "Diana," Richard said sharply, "this is a private board meeting. You need to leave immediately." But Diana had spotted Marcus. "You," she said, her voice breaking. "You set me up to fail. But he—" She pointed at Richard. "He promised he'd protect me. He said to handle the complaints the usual way, and he'd make sure they disappeared." Richard stood abruptly. "My niece is clearly upset and not thinking clearly. Security." "Actually," Marcus said quietly, "I think Diana is finally thinking very clearly." He turned to her. "What exactly did Richard tell you about handling passenger complaints, Diana?" Diana looked between her uncle and Marcus, the realization of her position dawning on her face. He said minority passengers complain more to get free upgrades. That documenting everything would just encourage more complaints. That certain passengers should be managed firmly to maintain order." Board members exchanged alarmed glances. "That's enough," Richard snapped. "Diana, leave now." "Is that why complaints from black passengers were flagged and buried?" Marcus pressed. Diana nodded slowly. "It was policy. Unofficial, but everyone knew. Uncle Richard said it was for the good of the company." The boardroom erupted in multiple conversations. Richard attempted to regain control, but Patricia called for order. "I believe we've heard enough," she said firmly. "I move that we vote on Mr. Whitmore's continued service on this board rather than Mr. Washington's leadership." "You can't do that," Richard objected. "Board bylaws, Section 4.2, Patricia recited. "Any director may be removed for cause by majority vote." The vote proceeded quickly and decisively, 12-2 in favor of removing Richard Whitmore from the Skyline Airlines Board of Directors, effective immediately. As security arrived to escort him out, Richard leaned toward Marcus. "You think this is over? This company is nothing in this industry. I built this industry. You'll regret the day you crossed me." As Richard was led away, his final words echoed with alarming venom. "You people always push too far, always demanding special treatment. This isn't just about one airline, Washington. This is about keeping things the way they should be." In Sota, that moment, Marcus realized the fight was far larger than Skyline Airlines. It extended throughout an industry built on decades of entrenched attitudes and practices, and it had only just begun. 2 weeks after Richard Whitmore's removal from the board, Marcus Washington faced his most challenging test yet. The industry-wide backlash had intensified beyond anything he'd anticipated. Competing airlines quietly canceled code-share agreements. Maintenance providers delayed critical services. Industry publications ran opinion pieces questioning whether social experiments belonged in aviation. The FAA audit of Skyline operations had mysteriously expanded in scope. Skyline's stock had stabilized, but remained well below its previous value. Booking volumes were down 18%. Every executive decision Marcus made faced unprecedented scrutiny. "They're trying to make an example of you," Thomas Jefferson observed during their morning security briefing. "Show what happens when someone challenges the status quo." Marcus nodded. "Then we'll have to make an example of ourselves, just not the one they're expecting." The showdown came at the quarterly Airline Industry Leadership Summit. Traditionally a closed-door gathering where top executives discussed common challenges, this year's summit had taken on new significance. Marcus had been conspicuously overlooked for speaking opportunities, but he attended nevertheless. The grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel buzzed with tension when Marcus entered. Conversations halted momentarily, before resuming with increased intensity. Few approached him directly. William Hargrove, CEO of Atlantic Airways, finally broke the ice. "Bold move coming here, Marcus. Not many friends for you in this room." "I didn't realize professional respect required friendship," Marcus replied evenly. "It's not personal," William insisted, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But your methods have made a lot of people uncomfortable." "Discrimination should make people uncomfortable," Marcus stated. "That's the point." The keynote address was delivered by none other than Charles Whitmore, Richard's son and CEO of Vista Airlines. His topic, maintaining service standards while managing passenger expectations, contained thinly veiled references to Skyline's situation. In today's environment, airlines face unprecedented challenges from passengers who confuse preferential treatment with equal treatment, Charles remarked. When executives pander to such misunderstandings rather than educating consumers about operational realities, they undermine the entire industry. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Marcus remained expressionless. During the panel discussion that followed, moderator Eliza Montgomery unexpectedly turned to Marcus in the audience. "Mr. Washington, since you've brought this issue into the public sphere, would you care to respond?" A calculated ambush, but one Marcus had prepared for. He approached the stage confidently. "Thank you for the opportunity," Marcus began, taking the microphone. "I'd like to share some data my team has compiled." He activated his presentation, which appeared on the giant screens. This shows complaint resolution rates across all major carriers, broken down by passenger demographics. The graphs revealed striking disparities, not just at Skyline but industry-wide. "This isn't about passenger expectations," Marcus continued. "It's about consistent service delivery regardless of who occupies the seat. When identical complaints receive different responses based solely on the complainant's appearance, that's not a perception problem, it's a service failure." Charles Whitmore interrupted. "These statistics can be interpreted many ways. Which is why we also analyzed service recovery costs," Marcus countered smoothly. "Carriers spend an average of $155 addressing complaints from white passengers versus $42 for minority passengers. The question isn't whether discrimination exists. It's why we're defending practices that are both morally wrong and financially inefficient." The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I've brought guests who can speak to this directly." From the back of the ballroom, Jasmine Thomas entered, followed by flight attendants from various airlines, all minorities, all in uniform. Behind them came passengers with their own stories, including Tamir Jones and his mother. "These aviation professionals and customers aren't here to attack our industry," Marcus explained. "They're here because they believe in its potential to be better." For the next 30 minutes, the unscheduled testimonials transformed the summit. Executives who had arrived defensive left thoughtful. Those who had come to condemn Marcus found themselves questioning long-held assumptions. 10-year-old Tamir's simple question resonated most powerfully. "If I grow up to be a pilot, will your airline let me fly the plane, or will I always be treated like I don't belong there?" By evening, the tone had shifted dramatically. Several CEOs approached Marcus, privately, admitting similar issues within their organizations and requesting guidance on addressing them. Others remained resistant, but had lost the unified front they'd presented initially. Marcus was leaving when Charles Whitmore intercepted him at the exit. "Clever performance," Charles said coldly. "My father warned me about you. Said you'd use emotion to override reason." "Data isn't emotional," Marcus replied. "Neither is equal treatment." Charles stepped closer. "My father built this industry while people like you were still figuring out how to buy tickets. You think one publicity stunt changes anything? We'll wait you out. Every financial quarter your numbers stay down, your board's resolve will weaken. This little crusade ends the moment your shareholders demand results over righteousness. That's where you're wrong, Marcus said. This isn't a crusade, it's a correction, and it's long overdue. We'll see, Charles smiled thinly. Vista just acquired 3 routes Skyline was bidding on. By next quarter, it'll be 6. Enjoy your moral victory while your airline crumbles. As Charles walked away, Marcus received a text from Zoe Chen. New information on Vista financing, call immediately. The battle lines were now clearly drawn. This wasn't just about Skyline anymore. It was about the soul of an entire industry, and Marcus Washington was just getting started. 3 months after the industry summit, Marcus Washington stood at Skyline's corporate headquarters unveiling the aviation industry's first comprehensive anti-discrimination framework. Camera flashes punctuated his speech as media outlets covered the event nationally. The Skyline standard isn't just a policy change, Marcus explained to the assembled press. It's a fundamental reimagining of how airlines serve their passengers, all their passengers. The framework included revolutionary changes: anonymous service audits conducted by diverse evaluators, transparent complaint tracking with demographic analysis, incentive structures rewarding consistent treatment rather than premium passenger preference, and quarterly public reporting of results. Behind the scenes, the transformation had been challenging but effective. Implementing these changes required overcoming deep-seated resistance at multiple levels. Reformation isn't simple, Marcus told his executive team during implementation. We're not just changing procedures, we're changing culture. Jasmine Thomas, now heading Skyline's newly created passenger advocacy department, became the public face of the airline's transformation. Her journey from reluctant whistleblower to corporate executive symbolized the airline's commitment to elevating underrepresented voices. Our frontline employees are our strongest asset, Jasmine explained during training sessions. They've always wanted to provide excellent service. They just needed leadership that valued equality as much as efficiency. The crew from Flight 2187 faced different outcomes. After completing sensitivity training and acknowledging past biases, several flight attendants were reinstated with probationary status. They became valuable voices during the transition, sharing how unwritten norms had shaped their behaviors. Bradley Wilson, however, refused the opportunity. "I won't apologize for maintaining standards," he declared before joining Vista Airlines, where several former Skyline employees had migrated under Charles Whitmore's leadership. Skyline's stock initially plummeted further as operational changes disrupted established patterns. Industry analysts predicted Marcus's approach would fail within 2 quarters. The board grew nervous, but remained committed after seeing early positive indicators in customer satisfaction scores. Thomas Jefferson, fully reinstated as head of security, implemented revolutionary changes in how potential disturbances were assessed. "We've eliminated subjective passenger profiling entirely," he explained to security teams. "Our new protocols focus exclusively on observed behaviors, not appearances or assumptions." The financial turning point came unexpectedly. When a major winter storm disrupted East Coast travel, Skyline's new policies resulted in remarkably even-handed disruption management. While competitors faced accusations of prioritizing certain passengers during rebooking, Skyline received praise for its transparent, first-come, first-served approach, regardless of passenger status or appearance. "Equality doesn't just feel better, it works better," Marcus noted in a subsequent board meeting, highlighting improved operational metrics. By the 6-month mark, Skyline had become an industry case study. Passenger advocacy groups directed members toward the airline. Corporate travel offices began including equal treatment metrics in carrier selection criteria. Most significantly, minority passenger bookings increased 37%, more than offsetting initial losses. The transformation wasn't without personal cost. Marcus's marriage faced strain under the constant pressure. Death threats required enhanced security for his family. 80-hour work weeks left him exhausted. "Was it worth it?" Layla asked late, one night, finding Marcus reviewing data in their home office at 2 a.m. "Ask me when we're finished," he replied. "And when will that be?" Marcus looked up from his computer. when every passenger can board any aircraft without feeling they need to prove they belong there. Richard Whitmore hadn't disappeared quietly. His attempt to launch a competing airline faltered when investors questioned his judgment after discrimination. Lawsuits from former employees became public. However, his influence remained strong behind the scenes, with industry connections stretching back decades. The most unexpected development came when competing airlines began cautiously adopting elements of the Skyline standard. First regional carriers, then international airlines implemented modified versions of Marcus's framework, driven by market realities rather than moral imperatives. "They're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons," Thomas observed. "I'll take it," Marcus replied. "Change happens one decision at a time." 8 months after Flight 2187, Marcus organized a symbolic flight with special significance. The reconstructed crew, minus Bradley, operated a charity flight carrying minority students interested in aviation careers. Jasmine, now wearing executive stripes, welcomed the students personally. "This industry belongs to everyone," she told them. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As students explored the cockpit, Marcus received a disturbing call from his home security system. Surveillance cameras had captured someone photographing his family through windows. By the time police arrived, the perpetrator had vanished, leaving behind only footprints in the garden. That night, Marcus received an envelope containing those photographs with a simple message: "Some fights never end." The warning was clear. While Skyline had changed, powerful forces still resisted the industry-wide transformation Marcus envisioned. His victory remained incomplete, his family potentially vulnerable, and his opponents determined. But something fundamental had shifted. Passengers now had a choice. Employees had witnessed the possibility of change. The conversation throughout aviation had permanently altered. As Marcus stared at the threatening photos, he didn't feel defeat. He felt responsibility, not just to his airline or family, but to every person who had ever felt diminished by systemic discrimination. The Reformation had begun, but the hardest battles still lay ahead. 6 months later, Marcus Washington stood at Gate C-42, observing the boarding process for Flight 2187, deliberately maintained as Skyline's flight number on this route, as a constant reminder of how far they'd come. He watched as passengers of all backgrounds received identical greetings, consistent information, and equal treatment from gate agents and flight attendants. No extra verification for some passengers, no preferential treatment for others. Just professionalism applied, universally. Skyline Airlines had transformed its operational reality. The company now led industry metrics not just in equality measures, but in overall customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. After the initial drop, their stock had rebounded to record highs as investors recognized the business value of consistent service delivery. The airline's terminals featured digital dashboards displaying real-time service statistics broken down by passenger demographics. Transparent accountability that initially terrified executives, but ultimately drove improvement throughout the system. Marcus boarded anonymously, taking a middle seat in economy. No executive privileges, no special recognition, just another passenger on a full flight. Beside him, an elderly black woman settled in, carefully stowing her bag. "First time flying Skyline?" Marcus asked conversationally. "Oh no, young man. I've been flying since segregated terminals were still around." She adjusted her reading glasses. "But first time I haven't felt the need to dress up just to be treated decent. Your CEO changed things. I read about him." Marcus smiled. "I've heard he had a lot of help." Across the industry, the changes had rippled outward in concentric circles of influence. Civil rights organizations now published airline equality ratings alongside government on-time statistics. Corporate travel departments included treatment metrics in carrier selection criteria. Flight attendant unions had incorporated anti-discrimination provisions in their latest contracts. Most significantly, 3 major airlines had implemented their own versions of the Skyline standard after recognizing its business benefits: reduced complaints, improved efficiency, and access to an expanded customer base that had previously avoided air travel when possible. The old guard hadn't surrendered easily. Richard Whitmore had assembled investors for a hostile takeover attempt of Skyline. only to withdraw when multiple discrimination lawsuits against his previous airlines became public. The evidence Zoe Chen had gathered proved decisive in those cases. Charles Whitmore's Vista Airlines remained Skyline's primary competitor, marketing itself as traditional premium service, coded language that attracted passengers uncomfortable with Skyline's equality emphasis. Their business model maintained the old hierarchies, but their market share steadily declined each quarter. As Flight 2187 reached cruising altitude, Marcus reflected on the unexpected allies who had emerged during the past year. Senior executives from competing airlines had confidentially sought his advice on implementing similar changes. Government transportation officials had consulted him on policy revisions. Aviation academies had invited him to speak about institutional transformation. The Thomas Jefferson Security Protocol, emphasizing behavior assessment rather than appearance profiling, had been adopted by airports nationwide after demonstrating superior results in threat detection while eliminating discrimination complaints. Skyline's hiring diversity had increased naturally once barriers fell. Applications from minority candidates rose 83% after the airline's stance became public. People wanted to work where they would be valued equally. Midway through the flight, Marcus recognized a flight attendant approaching. Jasmine Thomas, now Senior Vice President of Customer Experience, still worked occasional flights to maintain connection with frontline realities. "Water, sir?" she asked with professional courtesy, not acknowledging their relationship to maintain his anonymity. "Thank you," Marcus replied simply. After she moved on, his seatmate leaned closer. "You know, I've been watching. They treat everyone the same. Now, it shouldn't be remarkable, but it is. Progress often feels that way," Marcus observed. "What should have always been normal feels revolutionary when it finally happens." His phone buzzed with a message from Layla. Letter arrived from Tamir. "You should read it immediately." Upon landing, Marcus opened the message from the young boy whose complaint had started everything. "Now 11, Tamir had written. Mom says I can be a pilot if I study hard. I'm going to fly for Skyline someday because you made it fair. I'm not scared to fly alone anymore." Attached was a child's drawing of an airplane with Captain Tamir written on the cockpit. As Marcus exited the terminal, he passed a wall displaying Skyline's new corporate value statement. Every passenger, every flight, every time. Below it, statistical dashboards showed service consistency across all demographic categories. Outside, representatives from the 5 largest competing airlines waited beside their CEO, Charles Whitmore, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Marcus," Charles said stiffly, "we need to talk." The past month had seen a significant shift. After Business Travel Monthly published an article titled "The Skyline Effect: Equality as Competitive Advantage," industry resistance had crumbled. Shareholders across multiple airlines were demanding similar transformations after seeing Skyline's financial results. "We're forming an industry commission on service standardization," Charles explained. "The board feels Skyline's expertise would be valuable." Translation: "We can't fight this anymore. We need your help to adapt." "I'm listening," Marcus replied. As they walked toward the conference room, Marcus noticed Thomas approaching rapidly with concern etched on his face. "Sir, Richard Whitmore just announced a new international airline venture with significant foreign investment. He's explicitly marketing it as traditional service for passengers who appreciate distinction." Charles looked away, clearly aware, but unwilling to comment on his father's latest maneuver. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The struggle would continue. Powerful interests would keep fighting. Progress would face constant resistance. But something fundamental had changed. A door once opened could never be fully closed again. Passengers had experienced equal treatment and recognized its value. Employees had witnessed the possibility of a different system. The conversation throughout aviation had permanently altered. Later that evening, as Marcus reviewed Skyline's quarterly performance, a video call came in from the CEO of Pacific Global Airlines, the industry's largest carrier. "Washington," the executive said without preamble. "Our board voted today. We're implementing your full framework next quarter. Our studies show we can't compete if we don't." "Glad to hear it," Marcus replied, happy to share our implementation roadmap. To be clear, the CEO added, I think this whole thing was unnecessary, but the market has spoken. Equality is profitable. Who would have thought? After ending the call, Marcus stared out his office window at the skyline fleet on the tarmac below. Aircraft that now carried passengers who could expect the same experience regardless of their appearance, background, or identity. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was progress. Measurable, sustainable progress that improved both human dignity and business performance. Outside his office, Alicia was organizing his schedule for the next day. Meetings with transportation officials about expanding the framework to other travel sectors, interviews with international media, and a school visit where he'd meet aspiring young aviators from underrepresented communities. The work continued. The resistance remained. But with each passing day, equal treatment was becoming the new normal. Not just at Skyline, but across an industry that had resisted change for generations. On his desk sat the drawing from young Tamir, now framed. A simple reminder that systems changed one decision, one person, one flight at a time. Marcus smiled. It was just the beginning. This story powerfully illustrates how systemic discrimination often operates beneath the surface, invisible to those not experiencing it directly. Marcus Washington's journey reveals that true leadership sometimes requires unconventional methods to expose deeply entrenched inequalities. His undercover operation wasn't just about catching individual employees. It exposed an entire culture that had normalized differential treatment based on race. The narrative demonstrates how discrimination is frequently maintained by powerful interests who benefit from the status quo. Richard Whitmore represents those who actively work to preserve systems of inequality while maintaining plausible deniability. His eventual downfall shows that even entrenched power can be challenged when evidence is gathered systematically and allies are cultivated strategically. The story also highlights the importance of courageous whistleblowers like Jasmine, who risk their livelihoods to speak truth. Without her testimony, the systemic nature of the discrimination might have been dismissed as isolated incidents. Perhaps most importantly, the story illustrates that moral imperatives and business success are not mutually exclusive. By the end, Skyline Airlines demonstrates that treating all passengers with equal dignity is not just ethically right, but also financially sound. The Skyline standard proves that addressing discrimination creates value by expanding customer bases, increasing employee satisfaction, and improving operational efficiency. The journey wasn't easy. Marcus faced personal threats, professional retaliation, and institutional resistance. Yet his persistence shows that transformative change, while difficult, is possible when pursued with unwavering commitment and strategic intelligence. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered if speaking up would make any difference? Marcus's story shows that one person's courage can spark industry-wide transformation. What small step could you take today to promote equality in your own environment? Drop a comment below sharing a time when you witnessed or experienced unfair treatment and how it was addressed, or how you wish it had been addressed. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about courage, justice, and positive change. Share this video with someone who might need inspiration to stand up against discrimination in their workplace or community. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, as Marcus demonstrated, creating a more equitable world happens one decision, one conversation, and one action at a time. Together, we can transform systems that once seemed unchangeable.